Good morning, my darlings, and welcome to day 21 of the 31 Days of Horror. Today I bring you a very timely classic. It's 48 years old, the same as me. Written in 1976 by Dean R Koontz, I bring you Night Chills. And boy, oh boy, what a vicious little darling this one is. Yes, you are, my little love. Vicious, evil, nasty little tale. Cautionary about government conspiracies, poisoning of the local townsfolk, and all the thrills that go with it. Oh, yes. Dean, you do not disappoint. Uncle Dean does it again and gives us a very early one of his tales. Yes, 48 years ago. Can you believe it? So long ago. And when this was reprinted by this Headline Book Publishing PLC in 1991, I was 15 years old. That's 33 years ago that this book was done. Gosh, such a long time ago. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about night chills. We cover mind control. We certainly do. Which an evil consortium uses drugs and subliminal messaging in advertising to take over the world. But rather than just take over the world straight away, they thought they'd have a little trial practice run with a nice little New England town called Black River. Yes, they thought, why not drop the hallucinogenic, mind-bending, mind-controlling drug into the town's water supply, and let's see what can possibly go wrong. And what corner of God's green earth did anybody ever think that that was a really good idea? Oh my goodness. If it's written down on paper, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Yes, plans on paper rarely work when they are enacted, shall I say. First contact with the enemy, the plan on paper never works. What on earth did they think that they were doing? Seriously, honestly, I'll go to the foot of our stairs. I have never known. It's just bonkers. We'll put some mind-enhancing hallucinogenic drugs into the water supply. What could possibly go wrong? Honestly, madness. Mental. And that's what this book is. I wish Roger Corman had got hold of this one as well. Can you imagine? This would have made such a fantastic monster movie. Oh, it would indeed. The townsfolk getting night chills, running to the doctors with strange sexual urges and compulsive, unbelievably evil, barbaric behaviour, which, when you're on this mind-controlling drug, I guess makes you feel completely normal. Very, very strange. Sexual practices going on in this book are beyond bonkers. They are bizarre, they are perverse, they are the most perverted sex scenes I have ever read in a book. And I'm not easily shocked. I read Sean Hudson. This one, I've got to say, I was a bit lost for words, which is very unusual for me because words are my trade. They certainly are. Yes, I was stunned at the level of depravity that was put forth in this book. It must be very early Dean Koontz because his later books aren't as salacious as this one was. This was quite stunning. I have, good grief. It's so graphic and violent is this book. Honestly, it's relentless. It does not let up from the minute you pick up the book to the minute you put it down. For a lot of people, it might put them off Dean Koontz. I mean, I've got to say, I was slightly taken aback because I've not really come across such graphic sexual violence as well. I mean, it's depravity in a whole new level. Shocker. A real shocker. Goodness me. Anyway, you won't be disappointed with the book, and it might even give you a few ideas for a Friday night surprise for your partner. You never know. Although they might be looking at you slightly bewildered. Oh, where on earth did they learn that? Oh, dearie me. I shouldn't. Oh, I was, yeah, quite shocked. Well, we have three bad guys. The Army General, Ernest Klinger, an immoral scientist called just a scientist called Ogden Salisbury, not doctor. He would be a mad doctor if he was a doctor, definitely. And a multi-millionaire called Leonard Dawson. Now, three megalomaniacs throw this acid trip from hell into the town's water supply of Black River and then sit back to wait and see what happens to the residents of the town. Honestly, some of these residents get to know each other a little bit too well. And some go bump in the night and bumped off in the night too. Blimey. Remind myself to never go camping in New England. And for goodness sakes, drink bottled water. Wowzers. Our main protagonist, dun dun dun, is a widower called Paul Annandale. He usually takes his children, Raya and Mark, on their annual camping trip to this New England town of Black River. Gee, Dad, this year do you think we could go to Disneyland? Please? Honestly, woohoo! These kids are going to get an education. Are they not? Wowzers. You know, if things weren't hard enough being a widower, now he has to have LSD contaminated funkadelic water. Yes, absolutely. Honestly, in the worst possible taste, this book is seriously effed up. It really is. Can Paul and Sam Edison, the owner of the local store in town, stop this illegal conspiracy before it's too late? Can they stop these three megalomaniacs from basically slaughtering an entire town? You could be bonked on the head to death or bonked literally to death. Blimey. Wow. This is just a twisted little tale. It truly is. Not one for children. No. I feel sorry for the children that are in it. Absolutely. So, will the evil consortium take over with mind control and subliminal messages with the chemical LSD doodah that is in the water? Will they succeed in killing off the townsfolk? Will Our hero, Paul Annandale, and Sam Edison saved the day. You'll have to read the book, darlings, to find out. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but my goodness me, you are going to love this one. Yes, it's a kink fest from start to finish, with lots of shocking, salacious deaths and maiming and all heaven and hell. My goodness me, if there's a way to kill someone, this book is probably going to cover it. I'll read you some of them all. Juicy bits. Oh, yes, I will. We like a juicy tale, don't we, my darlings? Saturday, August the 6th, 1977. The first chapter of the book. This is called The Beginning. The dirt trail was narrow. Drooping boughs of tarmac Drooping boughs of tamarack, spruce, and pine scraped the roof and brushed the side windows of the Land Rover. "Stop here," Rosner said tensely. Holbrook was driving. He was a big, stern-faced man in his early 30s. He gripped the wheel so tightly that his knuckles were bloodless. He braked, pulled the Rover to the right, and coasted in among the trees. He switched off the headlamps and turned on a dashlight. "Check your gun," Rosner said. Each man wore a shoulder holster and carried a Sig Peter, the finest automatic pistol in the world. Oh, I should say Sig Peter, not Sig Peter. They pulled the magazines, checked for a full complement of bullets, slammed the magazines back into the butts, and holstered the guns. Their movements seemed to be choreographed, as if they had practiced this 1,000 times. They got out and walked to the back of the car. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the Maine woods were ominously dark and still. Holbrook lowered the tailgate. A light winked on inside, and he threw aside the tarpaulin, revealing 2 pairs of rubber hip boots, 2 flashlights, and other equipment. Rosner was shorter, slimmer, and quicker than Holbrook. He got his boots on first, then he dragged the last 2 pieces of their gear from the car. The main component of each device was a pressurized tank, much like an aqualung cylinder, complete with shoulder straps and a chest belt. A hose led from the tank to a stainless steel pin spray nozzle. They helped each other into the straps, made certain their shoulder holsters were accessible, and paced a bit to get accustomed to the weight on their backs. At 3:10, Rosner took a compass from his pocket, studied it in his flashlight beam, put it away, and moved off into the forest. Holbrook followed, surprisingly quiet for such a large man. The land rose rather steeply. They had to stop twice in the next half hour to rest. At 3:40 they came within sight of the big Union sawmill. 300 yards to their right, a complex of 2- and 3-story clapboard and cinder block buildings rose out of the trees. Lights glowed at all the windows, and arc lamps bathed the fenced storage yard in a fuzzy purplish white light. Within the huge main building, giant saws stuttered and whined continuously. Logs and cut planks toppled from conveyor belts and boomed when they landed in metal bins. Rosner and Holbrook circled around the mill to avoid being seen. They reached the top of the ridge at 4 o'clock. They had no difficulty locating the man-made lake. One end of it shimmered in the wan moonlight, and the other end was shadowed by a higher ridge that rose behind it. It was a neat oval, 300 yards long and 200 yards wide, fed by a gushing spring. It served as a reservoir for both the big Union Mill and the small town of Black River that lay 3 miles away in the valley. They followed the 6-foot-high fence until they came to the main gate. The fence there was to keep out animals, and the gate was not even locked. They went inside. At the shadowed end of the reservoir, Rosner entered the water and walked out 10 feet before it rose nearly to the tops of his hip boots. The walls of the lake slanted sharply, and the depth at the centre was 60 feet. He unravelled the hose from a storage reel on the side of his tank and grasped the steel tube at the end of it and thumbed a button. A colourless, odourless chemical exploded from the nozzle. He thrust the end of the tube under water and moved it back and forth, fanning the fluid as widely as possible. In 20 minutes his tank was empty. He wound the hose around the reel and looked towards the far end of the lake. Holbrook had finished emptying his tank and was climbing out onto the concrete apron. They met at the gate. "Okay?" Rosner asked. "Perfect." By 5:10 they were back at the Land Rover. They got shovels from the back of the car and dug 2 shallow holes in the rich black earth. They buried the empty tanks, boots, holsters, and guns. For 2 hours Holbrook drove along a series of rugged dirt trails, crossed St. John River on a timber bridge, picked up a gravel lane, and finally connected with a paved road at 8:30. From there Rosner took the wheel. They didn't say more than a dozen words to each other. At 12:30 Holbrook got out at the Starlight Motel on Route 15, where he had a room. He closed the car door without saying goodbye, went inside, locked the motel door, and sat by the telephone. Rosner had the Rover's tank filled at a Sunoco station and picked up the Interstate 95 south to Waterville and past Augusta. From there he took the main turnpike to Portland, where he stopped at a service area and parked near a row of telephone booths. The afternoon sun made mirrors of the restaurant windows and flashed off the parked cars. Shimmering waves of hot air rose from the pavement. He looked at his watch, 3:35 p.m. He leaned back and closed his eyes. He appeared to be napping, but every 5 minutes he glanced at his watch. At 3:55 he got out of the car and went to the last booth in a row. At 4 o'clock the phone rang. Rosner. The voice at the other end of the line was cold and sharp. "I am the key, Mr. Rosner." "I am the lock," Rosner said dully. "How did it go?" "As scheduled. You missed the 3:30 call. Only by 5 minutes." The man at the other end hesitated. Then, "Leave the turnpike at the next exit, turn right onto the state route, put the Rover up to at least 100 miles an hour. 2 miles along, the road takes a sudden turn. Hard right. It's flanked by a fieldstone wall. Do not apply your brakes when you reach the curve. Do not turn with the road. Drive straight into that wall at 100 miles an hour." "Uh-huh." Rosina stared through the glass wall of the booth. A young woman was crossing from a restaurant towards a little red sports car. She was wearing tight white shorts with dark stitching. She had nice legs. Glenn? Yes, sir. Do you understand me? Yes. Repeat what I've said. Rosina went through it, almost word for word. Very good, Glenn. Now go do it. Yes, sir. Rosina returned to the Land Rover and drove back onto the busy turnpike. Holbrook sat quietly, patiently, in the unlighted motel room. He switched on the television set, but he didn't watch it. He got up once to use the bathroom and to get a drink of water, but that was his only break in his vigil. At 4:10, the telephone rang. He picked it up. Holbrook? I am the key, Mr. Holbrook. I am the lock. The man at the other end of the line spoke for half a minute. Now repeat what I've said. Holbrook repeated it. Excellent. Now do it. He hung up, went into the bathroom, and began to draw a tub full of warm water. When he turned right onto the state route, Glenn Rosner pressed the accelerator all the way to the floor. The engine roared. The car's frame began to shimmy. Trees and houses and other cars flashed past, mere blurs of colour. The steering wheel jumped and vibrated in his hands. For the first mile and a half he didn't look away from the road ahead, not even for a second. When he saw the curve ahead, he glanced at the speedometer and saw that he was doing slightly better than 100 miles per hour. He whimpered, but he didn't hear himself. The only things he could hear were the tortured noises produced by the car. At the last moment he gritted his teeth and shuddered. The Land Rover hit a 4-foot-high stone wall so hard that the engine was jammed back into Rosner's lap. The car ploughed part of the way through the wall. Stone shot up and rained back down. The Rover tipped onto its crushed front end, rolled over onto its roof, and slid across the ruined wall and burst into flames. Holbrook undressed and climbed into the tub. He settled down into the water and picked up a single-edged razor blade that lay in the porcelain rim. He held the blade by the blunt end firmly between the thumb and the first finger of his right hand, then slashed open the veins in his left wrist. He tried to cut his right wrist. His left hand could not hold the blade. It slipped from his fingers. He plucked it out of the darkening water, held it in his right hand once more, and cut across the bridge of his left foot. Then he leaned back and closed his eyes. Slowly he drifted down a lightless tunnel of the mind into ever-deepening darkness, getting dizzy and weak, feeling surprisingly little pain. In 30 minutes he was comatose. In 40 minutes he was dead. So the goons that they got to do the wretched crime that gave everybody in Black River night chills and some night thrills. Yes, oh my goodness me, they got rid of them by mind control. They made them kill themselves. Well, if that doesn't just set you up for the rest of the novel, I don't know what will, my people. Yes, my avid readers, my darling readers, I know that you're going to enjoy this little sick, twisted, perverted little book. As horrors go, this is quite the one. Uncle Dean, what were you thinking? Were you taking something at the time of writing this? Inquiring minds want to know. Yes, we do. Anyway, with that in mind, approach this book with extreme caution and thoroughly enjoy it from start to finish. It's a right twisted little thing. Spooky season. More like kooky season. Definitely. A very early Dean Koontz, but not one to be missed. Goodness me. You might learn a thing or two. You never know. Stranger things have happened. Well, my darlings, if you like what I've done, you can always give me a thumbs up. If you really like what I do, you can always give me a follow and find out what tomorrow's little ghoulish gem is going to be. Until then, my loves, we're getting ever closer to Halloween. 10 more days. Woo! Indeed. Happy readings, my darlings, and enjoy. Don't have too many nightmares now. I shall see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.